everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 30th of May 2024. Before moving on to the agenda, I would just like to make it clear that after Agenda Item 5, the report on Section 106 agreements, the press and public will be asked to leave as a planning enforcement report needs to be heard in private due to data protection. The first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Maritime, I'm covering for him.
Councillor Hackwell?
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Etheridge, I'm covering tonight.
And Councillor Brown?
Apologies from Councillor Peake, I'm covering for him.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, urgent matters by reason of special circumstances. I can confirm that there aren't any late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 3, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? No. Okay, thank you. Item 4, planning application for land at Chatham Docks. Councillor Tijan has asked if he can address the committee as ward member for this item. Is that agreed by members? Agreed, thank you. I'm first going to hand over to Laura Kyles, Assistant Head of Legal Services, to summarise on the briefing note that we have all been given.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. We're aware that there has been a lot of attention in relation to tonight's application, and as such, I thought it would be helpful if I reminded you of the matters you can take into account when determining the application this evening. You will recall from your training that the only things that can be considered are planning matters, and issues such as ownership of land, who the applicant is, the end user of the land, and any issues relating to existing leases on the land are not material planning considerations. In determining this application, you should take account of the policy framework as outlined in the officer's report and other material considerations set out in the officer's report, which the presentation shortly will take you through. If you're unsure whether something is a material planning consideration, then Dave or I will be happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Hannah Gunner, Principal Planner, is going to present this application. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is for land at Chatham Docks and is for an outline application with some matters reserved, being appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for the demolition and redevelopment of the site to provide a new waterside business and enterprise campus, including access. The application site is 7.6 hectares in size and is located on the southern side of Basin 3. Access to the site is via Gillingham Gate Road, which is just being pointed out here, and there's existing access into the site onto Southside 3 Road here. So this aerial photograph is just putting the site in some context. So I'll just point out that we've got basins 1, 2 and 3. We've got the northern part of the employment area here, and we have the lock gates located here. Obviously the application site being in the red area. We have to the north St Mary's Island residential scheme or residential area, and then just to the west of the application site is what was Colonial House, now known as Colonial Wharf. Forgive me if I refer to either or both throughout the presentation process. We've got Dockside Shopping Centre to the west as well, and then to the east here we've got what is known as Chatham Waters, which is a development that comprises of residential, which we've got in the form of 2 blocks of flats here, X1 and Kell House. There's also affordable flat blocks here, along with a retirement complex which is coming forward, and then we have retail in the form of Asda's. We have the pub there, the Marston Rigging pub, and there's the Asda petrol station as well. And then adjacent to that site, we've got the Victory Pier Berkeley development, which consists of residential. There's also a hotel there, and there's a mixture of various commercial uses, including takeaways and retail units. Again, this just shows the extent of the employment area as shown in the 2003 local plan. So the application site is highlighted in yellow towards the south of the employment area, and the areas that are now developed, known as Chatham Waters and Victory Pier, are highlighted here, with Chatham Waters being the green area and Victory Pier being that blue area there. So this just helps to put the site again in context with some images. Appreciate actually these images aren't particularly clear, but as we move through the presentation there are further images to help demonstrate these viewpoints. But you can see where these pink dots are. So this one here is a view along Pier Road. Again, this is the Colonial Wharf development here, and then we've got looking in across the site from Chatham Waters, and again this is looking from the site entrance out towards the roundabout, and this is Kell House that's within Chatham Waters here, and the waterfront UTC here. That's a better picture of waterfront UTC, and then this shows the site entrance basically taken from the end of the promenade at Chatham Waters. This plan here shows the existing footprint of the buildings on site. Currently, these amount to approximately 18,000 square metres of employment buildings. What we can also see here is the extent of open storage space that sits in front of this building here. What we can see as well a bit more clearly is the Gillingham Gate Road entrance and how that goes onto Southside 3 Road. And then I'll just point out as well in this plan that at the moment vehicles accessing the northern part of the employment site come down Southside 3 Road and up Barrack Road. This actually remains unchanged as part of the application, but we'll see that going through. So these are some slightly better images, hopefully, showing the site. So these are taken from the Chatham Waters development. So looking along here, so this is the existing cement company that works out of the site. And you can see in this picture here as well, this is the cement works and the cement carrier that's sitting at berth 2. And then these lower pictures here we've got taken from the end of the promenade, again looking out towards the basin. So we can see the application site here. And then we can see the north part of the employment site this side. And then this last one on this page is taken from the entrance point looking in on Southside 3 Road. Again, we just see how this application site relates to Chatham Waters. So you can see Kell House here and the X1 development, and then we've got the basin, and then we have the planning application site here. This, again, just shows the entrance point into the application site, and you can see, obviously, vehicles coming in and out of Southside 3 Road. And this is a photograph that just demonstrates the promenade that is the residential walkway that goes around Chatham Waters in front of Kell House and X1. The aerial shot at the top of the page here again shows Kell House, which is the residential development, and then we can see the buildings that form part of the application site here. Also point out as well that we've got the cement carrier sitting here. I think that's the HMS President there, and then we can see the Colonial House site here. These lower pictures, again, you can see the site here. This is the main large brown building that you'll see as we go into further images, and then we can see the Colonial Wharf development here. And this picture's been taken from within the Colonial Wharf development. So this is the fence line separating the application site from the Colonial Wharf development. And we can see that's open storage sitting the other side of that fence. And then we've got the large brown structure that we'll see going forward. So these images from Pier Road show the large brown building that I was just referring to that sits adjacent to the Colonial Wharf development. And then we can see the pedestrian footbridge just here in relation to the site. And this image at the bottom is taken from further down nearer towards the Asda development, and we can see this white roof here is the cement works building, and then we've got the blue buildings here, and you can see the pedestrian footbridge here with that brown building from above just in the background there. So these photographs have actually been taken from the pedestrian bridge that goes over Pier Road. So we can see into the site, so we can see the open storage here. And again, we can see its proximity to the Colonial Wharf development just here. And then this is just to sort of demonstrate the size and scale of the buildings on site currently and how they sit in context with Pier Road. So on this bottom shot here, we can see the arches that sit within the underneath the pedestrian ramp that accesses the bridge, and there's the wall that fronts Pier Road. And again, just another image from the bridge looking down Pier Road towards the Victory Pier development, which you can see here. These images have been taken from what is known as the Pembroke Conservation Area. So this is the university campus that sits to the south of Pier Road. So we can see this is taken from Central Avenue, and we've got the university buildings here, and then we can see the current large brown structure in the background here, which would sit the other side of Pier Road. And then again from North Road on the top, we can see the structures that currently sit on site, just sort of in their view. So going through now, this is the submitted parameter plan. So the pink area is the development zone, which is to be used for B2, B8 and or EG uses. The maximum floor area that's set out within this parameter plan is up to 31,000 square metres. What we can see along this western edge here and also along the basin frontage are green areas, which are to be the hard and soft landscaped areas. And then we've got Southside 3 Road entrance here in yellow, which is remaining unchanged. And then we've got this blue zone here, which is classified as a transition zone with public realm, and is sort of aimed to join the Colonial Wharf development with the pedestrian access across here, but also it's a transition zone because it will actually serve as a junction up to Barrett Road to serve the north of the site. So going forward, what I want to point out here is that the following plans and sketches are all very illustrative. This is an outline planning application, so we're looking at the principle. What these next plans demonstrate is what could potentially come forward, what opportunities there are, and what potentially 31,000 square metres of space looks like. So this plan A just shows what kinds of built form could come forward. What you'll notice is that the buildings are designed to sort of face onto the basin, whereas currently they run east to west on site. But here we can just see how the scale of development will work in terms of the open spaces, the parking options, and how potentially the division of these units could come forward, including a smaller cluster of small businesses or starter business opportunities on this eastern side of the site. So moving on to this second layout plan. Again, it's just showing how these various properties could be divided. What I did want to point out here is the junction at the public realm and the transition onto Barrett Road here, and how that's designed to ensure that access to Barrett Road and the northern part of the site remains predominantly unchanged. However, it becomes more user-friendly. It would become a pedestrian link as well, so that properties within the Colonial Wharf development and beyond would actually be able to access the basin frontage to transition through the site towards Chatham waters. Again, just as an illustrative aid, this sketch has been submitted to show how the building masses could come forward, but also to demonstrate that the promenade or green space in front has opportunities for tree planting and for sort of leisure recreational uses, to form part of a user-friendly walk. Still looking at these, we can see how there would be pedestrian promenade, but also a cycle route through, leaving Southside 3 Road here, and the business development to the other side of the road, and along here, obviously, tree planting opportunities and safe pedestrian crossing opportunities as well, recognising that there would still be access through to the northern part of the employment area, but obviously that these business users may wish to access some of the pedestrian and public uses that this offers. Just reiterating the illustrative nature of these drawings, but again, this is just to understand scale and massing that could potentially come forward, and this helps to understand the relationship of Southside Free Road and how this can be enhanced with tree planting and crossing opportunities and some of the landscape aspirations that there are as a buffer zone between the pedestrian areas and the trafficked areas. And again, these are just further illustrations to demonstrate the same point. What I would point out here is there is a design principles document that has been submitted as part of the application. So the design principles document is put forward as something to come forward. It's conditioned so that the design of anything coming forward as a reserved matter would be in compliance with it. But this shows that there's sort of a vertical emphasis on some of the buildings, but also that building heights can vary as well. And again, these just help to try and illustrate the massing. Appreciate that there are large buildings on site currently, and what is being proposed are a series of large buildings. But in terms of scale and orientation and design, this is just to sort of demonstrate how they could come forward. So the application has public realm opportunities, as I've sort of pointed out, with the basin frontage. Within the design principles document, there is an illustrative landscape and public realm strategy, and these just help to sort of illustrate, again, the opportunities that can be incorporated in a reserve matters application coming forward, just to point some of these out. So potentially there's walkway and cycle path here, but then there's also, within this area here, some play opportunities with these sort of linear and informal play spaces, some seating opportunities, planting, and various crossing points to create safe crossing for pedestrian users. And I'd like to just sort of use this image to point out how the development sits in the wider area a bit clearer. So we can see the residential work, Chatham Waters, that I pointed out before, and the waterfront UTC building. And then we've got the Medway police station here. The university buildings sit to the south of the site here. We've got the Colonial House development or Colonial Wharf development here, Dockside Shopping Centre, and then we can see St Mary's Island, the northern part of the employment area, and the lock gates here. So, as has been demonstrated here, the proposed development would not result in any loss of employment on this site, and in fact offers an opportunity to increase the square meterage of employment space from 18,000 currently up to 31,000 square metres. The scheme would result in modern, flexible buildings for employment purposes, with a mix of how these will come forward being secured in a suitable condition. Officers consider that the proposal also offers unique waterfront opportunities and enhancements, including landscaping and leisure. As set out in the officer report, it's considered that this application will not have any detrimental impacts on heritage or the adjacent conservation area, and will have a positive impact on the docks, offering flexible regeneration, future-proofing the area. The application is considered to comply with policy, and for the reasons set out in the report, with the conditions set out within the report and the supplementary document, this application has been recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hannah. Could I please remind the public members to not cause a disturbance? Now over to Councillor Tijan, if you'd like to come forward. Councillor Tijan, you now have 5 minutes to speak.
Madam Chairman, members, thank you for granting me permission to address you. The decision you are about to take extends far beyond bricks and mortar. They ripple, touching lives and livelihoods. The applicant is proposing a new employment development that will replace existing industrial use. The main issue at hand is that this application could result in loss of employment, loss of 800 Medway jobs at one of the last working docks in the southeast of England. These jobs are not just numbers. They represent families and are crucial for our local and national economy. They may seem like a stark statement, but they underscore the gravity of the decision you are about to take. These jobs are not mere statistics. They represent families, they represent dreams, they are the backbone of our economy. The Planning Committee must weigh such decision with a future-oriented mindset, understanding the workforce, that any workforce displacement can lead to a devastating socio-economic vacuum, a vacuum that can last for decades, if not centuries. Madam Chairman, members, it falls upon this committee to act as the stewards of our community's economic health. This committee holds the power to either endorse a plan that risks significant job losses or to protect and preserve an employment ecosystem that has served us for decades. By safeguarding these jobs, we are not merely maintaining the status quo, we are upholding the integrity and future resilience of our local economy. This planning authority mandate is to ensure that the economic development doesn't come at the cost of community welfare. And in the face of growing global economic competition, the retention of manufacturing facilities within the UK has never been more critical. This narrative becomes alarmingly evident, especially when we are witnessing office spaces next door, I heard Colonial Wharf mentioned several times, that remain unoccupied or have been converted to residential apartments. There's no guarantee that the office spaces being proposed will not remain unoccupied or be converted to residential in the future. Moreover, the closure of Chatham docks will result in a significant increase in CO2 emission, impacting the health and well-being of residents in the near area. Consequently, there have been nearly 200 objections to this planning application, including representation from St. Mary's Island Resident Association. Likewise, the online petition to save Chatham docks had nearly reached 2,000 signatories. This exemplifies how crucial it is to protect this strategic infrastructure. Additionally, the timing of the application is a cause of concern. It is essential to ensure that all relevant information and consideration are thoroughly evaluated before making any decision. A premature decision could have unintended consequences. Madam Chairman, members, it would be best for the Council not to seek to determine the application today. The consideration of the application seems rushed. ArcelorMittal Kenwire raised several concerns about these applications. These concerns remain relevant, In addition, Madam Chairman, it is not appropriate for the application to be considered in the run-up to a general election, especially when the Secretary of State, whoever that will be after the general election, will be considering whether the application is one of a national importance and considering calling it in. Madam Chairman, members, the Secretary of State involvement underscored the strategic significance of this decision, and the Council should not be seeking to determine a politically sensitive application in that context. It is also strange to be holding the committee meeting so quickly during the half-term holiday and pre-election period, where many members could have been here today, Madam Chairman.
Councillor that's your 5 minutes up.
Thank you.
I now open the floor to members. Any members? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very interesting listening to the ward member and the points he's putting across. I've a couple of points for clarification, please. It refers to our papers on the Section 31 from the Minister of State that we shouldn't take any decision on this, and like the ward councillor, I'm wondering why we're doing that. And secondly, how much is it going to cost Medway? Part of our planning, when we're having our planning teaching, or whatever you call it, training, sorry, is that we should be very mindful of what it costs on the council regarding challenges. So would there be any on-costs for this for the council if this is challenged at a later date?
Over to you, Chief Planning Officer Dave Harris.
Chairman, thank you very much. Just wish to clarify the Section 31 holding direction. The Secretary of State has not taken a view on this. Holding directions are very common. What happens is if someone wishes the decision to be made, for approval to be made outside of the Council's hands, they will write to the Secretary of State and ask them to intervene. It's happened a number of times in Medway in the past. Gibraltar Farm, Manor Farm, Rochester Airport, just to name three. It is exceptionally common elsewhere in the southeast with the pressure for major development. And people understandably being concerned on that and asking the Secretary of State to intervene. The holding direction is not the Secretary of State taking a view on it at this moment in time. What it is the Secretary of State wants to consider all the facts and is saying, Medway Council, don't issue an approval on this until I have had the opportunity to consider those facts and decide whether to call in the application or not. So the Secretary of State has not taken a view on this. And as I said, it's extremely common for those holding directions to be used. The final point I'd like to say is that the officers from DLUC, who will be doing a report and having a recommendation for the Secretary of State, have still encouraged us to take the application to committee because they feel that that decision, whichever way it goes, will help the Secretary of State in deciding whether to call in the application or not. Having said that, if it's a refusal, the holding direction goes away. If it's an approval, then the reasons for that, the officer's report and everything will be a factor that the Secretary of State will consider in deciding whether to call the application in or not. In relation to your final point, Councillor Filmer, which is a matter of costs, all planning applications where there are decisions are potentially open to challenge, whether that's through an appeal for a refusal or in terms of an approval, a judicial review through the courts. What we try to do as officers, with the assistance of our legal officers, is to make sure that the report before you is one which is defendable to challenge. That doesn't mean to say that there won't be a challenge. I hope that's helpful, Councillor Filmer.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I'm grateful to the Chief Planning Officer for confirming that because of the Article 31 holding direction that no decision to approve the application can be issued, which comes on to my point, because in the recommendations on recommendation B, it says approval with conditions, which I'm a bit concerned with, because why does that recommendation exist if we can't lawfully do that? So if that's in the report, and I'm quite concerned why potentially us making an unlawful decision is in this report.
Yeah, over to Chief Planning Officer.
Chairman, if I can come back, that's a good question. I understand that question that Councillor Pearce asked, which is why recommendation A is the notification to the Secretary of State of a resolution to approve. Should that be the resolution, the Secretary of State will then consider all the facts and decide whether to call in the application or not. If he decides, or she decides not to call in the application, then our view is that the application should be approved with the conditions as set out. So that will be a decision we can issue if the Secretary of State has decided not to call the application in. If they decide to call the application in, then again, we will be setting out for them the officer's report and the conditions that members and officers would recommend should the application be approved. Now, this is very common. For instance, it's the same with appeals. Even where we've refused an application, we are required to put forward conditions that the inspector will consider. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Pearce.
If I can come back in, so I just need clarity that in the report we can't as a committee vote on recommendation B because that would be unlawful.
Chairman, if I can come back, and maybe the legal officer will want to come in as well. What you're saying is you can refuse the application. If you're minded to approve the application, that decision cannot be issued until the Secretary of State either calls the application in or says he or she is not calling the application in. So what you're doing is if you had been in a position to make a decision, you would have been approving it subject to those conditions, or you're refusing the application with good reason.
Just sorry to push on this, but just to confirm, can we vote on recommendation B? But that would go against Article 31.
No, it doesn't, because recommendation A is referral to is notification to the Secretary of State. So
is it two recommendations that would be voted on then? So just to clarify, can this committee vote on recommendation B, which in my view goes against Article 31, which would be unlawful?
No, it certainly wouldn't be unlawful. It's like where you're resolving to approve something subject to a Section 106 and conditions. So there's two headings there. What we're saying here is that if you can refuse the application, but if you're minded to approve the application, then you're approving it subject to those conditions as with the supplementary. But before any decision can be issued, it can't be issued, it's got to go to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State will then consider those conditions, the report, and will consider whether to call the application in or not. If he or she then says, no, Medway, I've read your report, I've read your conditions, I'm happy with that, issue that decision, then we can issue an approval. But an approval can't be issued without a Secretary of State doing one of those two things. So you're voting on both.
That's the clarification I needed. I just wanted to make sure that what is the difference between recommendation A and recommendation B, but you've clarified it would be both. Yeah. It'd be both. Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify, it is both, because obviously we wouldn't go ahead and issue any decision until the Secretary of State has done what they need to do. Effectively, what you're doing is looking at it today and deciding what decision you would make, were we making the decision. And obviously, if we then end up not making the decision and the Secretary of State calls it in, they would make the decision. But you're deciding what you would do with it if we were granting the decision and then issuing that planning permission.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Councillor Pearce, because that's right. It's not an either or. It's both together. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. From a planning perspective, I was just interested to know where there's this site, which already has employment, it's not a barren site at all, with the promise of more space, more floor area to have more employment. How does that affect a planning decision? Because, like I say, it's not an empty space with no employment, and then you would say, yeah, okay, there's a lot more opportunity for more employment in this area. But when it has employment already, the possibility of more just seems a very flimsy argument to put forward to the planning committee.
Chairman, it's not unusual. In large industrial estates, Gillingham Business Park, Kingswell, just two examples within Medway. You've got a larger industrial estate. It's not unusual for an application to come forward for part of that where the landowner considers that there are redevelopment possibilities which will give it greater flexibility and future-proofing. So it's not unusual in that respect.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chairperson. I appreciate that. In the report, on the social section, it talks about opening up the site to public access. And of course, we can see in the presentation that we're going to have a tree-lined quayside and it's going to be public access. But in the report, the same report, it talks about that the proposed development, which is this site, does not rule out port-related uses. So I'm a bit confused as how can you have public access and port-related uses? That would be a health and safety nightmare.
Chairman, thank you very much, and that's a very good question for clarification. In terms of port-related uses, there are some that could take place on this site. It could be B2, B8 uses associated with a port. However, there are some, you're right, there are some parts of a port-related use that could not take place within that area for customs and excise reasons. You can't have public access coming through a port.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Anang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the time of the application, I believe the council is looking into coming up with a new local planning plan. So what I'm thinking is that if the council is coming up with a new local planning plan, why are we rushing to not waiting for us to incorporate this into the local plan so that when it goes to consultation, we can get enough of members of the community to be part of the consultation? Because if you are coming with a local plan, then why don't we incorporate it into it with pushing, like the councillor said, he said, why should we be rushing to push such a very important issue forward? Because we are getting a local plan that we want to come up with. Why don't we wait? Then when we are doing the consultation, we put everything together and do the consultation with it, and then we embed it into our new local plan. Because we are saying our last local plan was in 2003. So I believe giving us a bit of time so that we embed it into the new local plan, that will make it better for us.
Chairperson, thank you very much for that. Members, this is not a rushed application. This is a major application. This is a major application which, in planning terms, the statutory period for the determination of this application is 13 weeks. We are well past that. The applicant could appeal tomorrow in terms of non-determination. So it's not a rushed application. The second thing in terms of the local plan, and we are working very hard in relation to the local plan, and absolutely the future of the docks is an important consideration, a very sensitive consideration in relation to that local plan. This is not a residential application. I must emphasize this because it was mentioned in the ward councillors speak. This is an employment application on an employment site. It does not.
Can I remind members of the public to please be quiet?
It does not predetermine the local plan.
Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have been on the planning committee for many years, but I'm actually substituting for the first time for over a year. And this is probably one of the most interesting debates we have. I've come here completely with an open mind and wanted to listen to everybody's views on this subject so that I could come to a conclusion. I think we must stress that this is just the south side, and numbers that have been bandied around is for the whole area, which is still not, as I'm saying, has been totally determined as the right numbers. So we are just talking about the south side. And it is a difficult decision because what we're being offered today is a promise of jam tomorrow. Today, we have employment on that area, but we are being offered an improvement to that area with maybe diverting the King Charles III coastal path through it along the quayside. We are talking about smartening the area up. So it's a very difficult decision. And I think what we're presented with tonight is a choice of accepting the status quo with the current employers taking their chance that they can come to an agreement with the landowner, or maybe putting new buildings in which hopefully will attract high-tech jobs and maybe involve some of our university students. But we also know that we tried something similar ourselves up at the airport, and we found it very difficult to fill those jobs with high-tech industries or those potential buildings. So I'm honestly looking to be persuaded one way or the other by the comments from the members from the committee so that we can make a qualified decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson, for letting me come back in. In the National Planning Policy Framework, there is a very important paragraph which comes into play for decision-making on applications, and that paragraph is point 2, where it says that any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably, if I can say the word, outweigh the benefits. So what that means is if the harms of this application outweigh the benefits, it should be refused. That harm includes economic harm. I think it's quite clear what the economic harm is with this site, as has been well documented. But there's also another important part of the NPPF which talks about building a strong competitive economy and taking into account both local business needs and wider opportunities for development. And this approach should allow each area to build on its strengths. Now, this docks is a strength for our area, including this southern part, which is the subject of this application. And look, in planning terms, I can't see the benefits outweighing the removal of this part of the docks, this strategic asset. These units, with the replacement business as such, business economy they're trying to replace, that can be built at Kingsnorth, it could be built at something which used to be called Innovation Park Medway. We can't really put that quayside somewhere else, that would be quite difficult. So there are economic reasons to refuse this, going back to that paragraph in particular. I'm not convinced that the benefits of this application outweigh the harm, and that harm, I believe, is significant economic harm. Thank you.
Over to Chief Planning Officer. Do I have any other member? Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like a quick recap because I think we're getting a bit confused. This is about the south side of this site. I'd like to know, if it's possible, how many jobs are being replaced, because Councillor Pearce seems to think that there are jobs going on this part of the site. The rest of the site, I understand that the member spoke to us about the possibility, and he did say the possibility that there would be serious economic change from this, and that the employer could decide to leave the other part of the site. But that's between the employer and the landowner. We're here to determine a planning application for employment on an employment site, and that's the only planning thing that I can see ahead of me.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Galvin.
Apart from Councillor Brown, it's very interesting that members opposite have not expressed any views on this. Is probably the most controversial planning application we've had in Medway for many a year. And it's intriguing that how U-turns can take place so quickly. I've got to say, I'm extremely disappointed with this proposed development. Having gone up to Salford and seen the quality of the development that Peel put up there and photographs of their other developments, this is a mere shadow we're being offered here in Medway compared with what they've done elsewhere. In fact, what we've been offered this evening is to swap some old crinkly sheds for some new, shinier crinkly sheds. That is all we're offering. There's no brand new ideas for employment opportunities. All we're doing is throwing away the employment opportunities that already exist on the site. Also, by removing the dock's biggest customer for shipping, I wonder how that affects the viability, not only of Chatham docks itself, but the rest of the River Medway. Because if you dramatically reduce the amount of shipping coming up the river, the light dues will not pay for the conservancy costs of keeping the navigational buoys in place. You need a certain amount of river traffic. So not only could we lose this employment, we could lose people like Scotland, because the river buoyage will not exist if that is not paid for. That is paid by the ships that come up and down the river. They pay their light dues. So, and will it be worth keeping a pilotage, I wonder. So I think the best thing is, let's stick to the status quo. There's the old saying, isn't there? A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. We've got a very vibrant bird in the hand. That bird in the hand is providing good, well-paid jobs for Medway people. It's also making not a significant contribution to the Medway economy, but also the economy in the southeast, with the amount of infrastructure work that Mattel support. So I will not be supporting this tonight. And I think we need to make a message loud and clear. If Peel wants to put something on this site, they have got to do a lot better than this. I don't think this is worth sacrificing what we've got for just a few more crinkly sheds that we've got plenty of on the Medway City Estate and on the Uniper site out in Kingsnorth. I cannot see any benefits to Medway from tonight's proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. I promise this will be my final contribution. I've just noticed this and I have to mention it. I won't mention the representation who it's from, but in one of the representations, it has said that the berth is not in active use. But then in the presentation we've had this evening, there's actually a ship, a boat, next to the quayside. I just have to put that on the record. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I had to come back. I think Councillor Hackwell is correct. I was on here a long time with him as well, and I'm subbing this evening. But I do have to say, Chair, that I find Councillor Golding coming back and criticising this side of the chamber. You must have forgotten what you've done previously and what you was planning for the whole of the port. When you tried to get a local plan through for housing on that site, and your group turned you down. So I want the audience to remember it's a very sensitive subject this evening, but not long ago you was putting forward a plan, your administration, to do more damage to the port. So I want that to be remembered tonight. But Dave, I want to ask you, I'm trying to read in the papers here. I think Councillor Brown asked a question about whether there has been an estimate of job losses. I know it's not necessarily a planning consideration, but obviously it's important, it's sensitive. Is there a figure or anything there? Or for this site, we're not talking about the port here, we're talking about for this application of any mitigation or any loss that we know of that will definitely happen, if there is that there.
Over to you, Dave.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald, this is an outline application. It's an outline application for a mixed-use development, B2, B8, and Class EG, as Hannah has explained. She's also set out the fact that there are currently 18,000 square metres of floor area, B2 and B8, currently on the site, but that this proposal would take it up potentially to 31,000 square metres of floor area of that mixed use. The conditions recommended before you, and in particular condition 27, I think it is, let me get that, yeah, 27, refers to, prior to this, the first reserve matters application, there needs to be a scheme demonstrating the mix of B2, B8, so looking to maintain at least 18,000 square metres of floor area for B2, B8, and then with an uplift of what is that, up to 31,000, that's 13,000 square metres, which could continue to be B8, could be B2, could be Class EG. Now, just for clarification, because there's been a reference to that being offices, Class EG is the old light industrial, Class B1 use. So that could be light industrial, could be office, could be creative businesses, high-tech businesses. So there's a lot of uses within there. It isn't just offices. Hopefully that helps.
Any other member? Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In my research before coming tonight, I also looked at the Medway Labour's page, where there's quotations from 4 of your current cabinet, all that say, save Chatham docks. So I would be very interested to see what the rest of the planning committee think about doing it. So I'd just like to remind the audience that the Labour cabinet members on their own site, which is currently live, are all quoted saying save Chatham docks.
Point of order. This is a planning committee.
Councillor
This is a planning
Hamilton-Shea.
committee. This is not supposed to be party political, and that side should know.
That's what I was saying.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton-Shea.
Yeah, just to support my colleague and over to Councillor Hackwell, this is not a political broadcast. I know you on the other side, the All Boys Club, are thinking this is an opportunity to throw rocks. But let's be clear, we're in this situation because of years of underinvestment in the docks. And you're just trying to hold back the tide. This is a planning committee, so we should be reviewing things on its planning merit alone. Because if we don't, we will set precedent for other planning applications. And I think you're overcooking the subject. To stick to planning considerations only.
Come back. I wasn't the first person to raise the political questions.
Any other member? No? No other member? Okay. I now move over to Chief Planning Officer Dave Harris to summarise.
Chair, thank you very much. Members, I know it got a bit heated in there, but thank you for that considered debate and the issues and the questions and the points that were made. I would just like to sum up the planning issues that members need to focus on in deciding which way to vote. And I do emphasize the planning issues. There has been a lot in the media and elsewhere regarding the docks and this application. Now, following on from the legal officer's introduction, it is important that I firstly clarify some facts in relation to this application. The future of the docks area is a matter which will require careful consideration. It is a very sensitive issue, demonstrated by the number of people in the audience here tonight, and that will be a matter for debate in future months. However, this application is not for the whole docks, but for only the smaller southern part of the site, shown here. It does not include any housing. It is an employment application on an employment site. There were also questions. There were also questions regarding whether the application required an environmental impact assessment. We had screened the application prior to it coming in. We have re-screened it. That was undertaken by an independent EIA expert. And again, it is confirmed that an environmental impact assessment is not required. Similarly, there was a question of whether an appropriate assessment was needed. Now, while the local planning authority do not agree that an appropriate assessment under the habitat regulations is required, and one has not been asked for by Natural England, the local planning authority has nevertheless undertaken one, and it confirms the proposal will not have an adverse effect on the integrity of the European protected sites. The application does not impact the lock gates. It does not impact the berths on the northern side of the basin. It does not stop the basin being used for a commercial port, and therefore in itself will not result in the docks closing. It does not impact on the continued use of the larger northern parcels for B2, B8 uses, including a commercial port. The matter of the dispute between the landlord and tenant is not a material planning consideration. As advised by the legal officer, you must focus on land use issues. I have explained earlier in terms of the holding direction from the Secretary of State, but would just emphasize that the officials from DLUC have encouraged us to take this application to committee. A decision on this application will not predetermine the local plan, and I have answered that question and explained that earlier. I've also explained what a Class EG use is, because there were questions as to it only being office, and it is not just office. It includes light industrial, includes high-tech and creative uses. The planning issues which should be considered in the determination of this application are set out clearly in the report and were covered in the officer's presentations. Now, national and local policies are key, and Councillor Pearce has mentioned some. Policy ED9 of the local plan on Chatham Port says port-related development and an expansion of the port at Chatham will be permitted. This application is not contrary to the wording of that policy. Policy ED1 states that in Chatham Port, development will be permitted only for B2 and B8 uses. Now, I've talked about condition 27 requiring the submission of a mix of B2, B8 and Class E uses to be submitted, with the objective of ensuring that the amount of B2, B8 floor space is not reduced as a result of this development. And condition 26 allows for up to 31,000 square metres, which, as Hannah advised, would allow for up to 13,000 square metres of Class EG or other floor space. It is considered that this application, with those conditions, is within the spirit of Policy ED1. The supporting text to Policy ED1 is important as it encourages the improvement of employment areas to enhance the image and efficiency of companies and the environment, which is considered important in the way potential investors perceive Medway. That's what's stated in the preceding paragraphs. The This is consistent with Section 6 of the NPPF on building a strong and competitive economy. Paragraph 85 talks about significant weight on supporting economic growth, building on strengths and countering weaknesses, and addressing the challenges of the future. It talks about Britain being a global leader in innovation. Paragraph 87 talks about specific locational requirements and goes on to make provision for networks of knowledge and data-driven creative or high-tech industries. Now, as has been mentioned, the 2003 local plan is 20 years old. And since then, we have seen the growth of the universities in Medway. But it is vital not only to provide for the education, but then to encourage and facilitate the retention of the skills learnt here in Medway. The nearby historic dockyard is not just a first-class tourist attraction. It is often used as a film set and is a place for learning and includes nationally important businesses with a focus on the digital and creative industries. We have the emergence of the docking station proposals at the old police house, which will allow for the further expansion of digital and creative industries and post-film production, etc. The links of the Basin 3 area, the subject of this application, to the universities and that wider business area as well as being within the Thames Estuary production corridor, brings a huge opportunity for employment development. The expansion of the potential employment uses within the Basin 3 application area from B2 and B8 to also include Class E brings with it a future-proofing for the area as promoted in local and national policy. It also brings with it a significant upgrading of the appearance and perception of the area, with those visual and physical links to the universities and wider area, which will be so important to future investors to Medway. Again, I must stress that this does not discount the B2, B8 uses and does not impact on that larger northern area in here. In addition, the proposal will significantly improve connectivity between Chatham, Maritime, St Mary's Island through to the universities, Chatham Waters, Victory Pier and the wider North Gillingham area. This will provide a greatly enhanced pedestrian and cycle links, removing the need to traverse along the unpleasant environment of Pier Road. This will have significant health benefits, provide for a connectivity to the wider area that does not properly exist at present, and will bring forward biodiversity net gain with the landscaping that will be provided. Members, you must determine this application on its planning merits and not on the premise of what may happen to the wider docks in the future. While important and something for sensitive discussion in the coming months, that is not a material planning consideration in this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Planning Officer. Before moving over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones, can I remind members that we, as members of Planning Committee, are here to look at the planning application in front of us and to judge it on its merits. Regardless of our own personal feelings, we as a committee cannot base its decision on the ownership of the land, property rights of parties concerned, the applicant as a person or company, and the specific end user. I would like to remind members that as committee members, we cannot and should not refuse a planning application if there are no legitimate grounds for refusal in planning terms. If this committee determines that it wishes to refuse the application, we must give clear reasons in planning terms for doing so. Without legitimate reasons, the decision is likely to be overturned at any future appeal hearing, with the Council incurring the legal costs of any appeal. Now move over to Vice Chairman, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is application MC 240154, land at Chatham Docks Industrial Estate, Southside 3 Road, Chatham. Just for the point of clarification, it's in St Mary's Island ward and the applicant is Peel Waters. I move recommendation A, notification to the Secretary of State of resolution to approve. I move recommendation B, approval with conditions 1 to 33, as set out in the report and in the supplementary agenda, and that includes amended recommendation 19 in accordance with the supplementary agenda. I so move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Those for? Those against?
That's 8 for, 7 against.
The application is approved. Moving on to item 5. Can I please ask members of the public to be quiet so we can move on with our committee meeting? Councillor Pearce, and please, can we not argue? Right, we're now going to move on to item 5, report on section 106 agreements. Dave Harris, Chief Planning Officer, is now going to present this.
Chair, thank you very much, and my apologies to Councillor Hamilton. I still struggle with the chairperson aspect, so my apologies to you, Chair. I will do my best. Members, before you've got report on Section 106 agreements between October 2023 to March 2024, a period of 6 months. There's 3 parts to the report. The first is Section 106 funding received in that period. The second part is agreements signed in that period. And then the third bit separates out the bird contributions that have been received and agreed in that period. Happy to answer any questions that members may have on the report.
Any member? Sorry, any member? I'll now move over to the Vice Chair, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I nearly called you the Vice Chair, I'm sorry. Recommendations. The committee is asked to consider and note the Section 106 funding received, those Section 106 agreements signed during the period October 2023 to March 2024 and habitat regulations contributions as set out in appendices 1 to 3. I move.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Right, those for the report? Good, yeah. Right, item 6 on the agenda, exclusion of the press and public. Is it agreed by members of the committee that the press and public should be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the documents? Agreed. Thank you. you.